In 1814, Francis Scott Key called America the land of the free and the home of the brave in his poem Defense of Fort McHenry. It was set to music and became our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. But one has to wonder, would Key have chosen these same words today, knowing that the United States has the highest incarcerated population in the world? A combination of the war on drugs and get tough on crime policies put forth by our political leaders and policymakers has led to approximately 2.4 million incarcerations, making our motto, the land of the free, appear to be an oxymoron. Difficulties in housing an ever-growing population of inmates and middle-class taxpayers calling for relief from the heavy financial burden caused policymakers to seek reform in the private prison industry. Private prisons are different than public prisons in that the government does not own or operate them. They are private-owned businesses contracted by local, state, and federal government agencies to house inmates for a fee. CEOs and managers of private prisons have the same expectations as any other CEO or manager: to generate new business and watch the bottom line. Here, there is an unsettling contradiction. A business whose purpose is to cut crime rates and rehabilitate those already incarcerated, yet they invest in policymakers and political campaigns that assure longer, harsher sentences for nonviolent offenders. Initially, the use of private prisons did two things. It relieved the state's lack of space for housing inmates and promised states that they could incarcerate inmates more cost-effectively and save the states thousands of dollars. Like plantation owners exploiting slaves for their own profit, private prisons are exploiting their inmates in slave-like ways, forcing them to do the work of their independent contractors for almost nothing. The combination of mass incarceration and outsourcing inmates soon turned the private prison industry into a multi-million-dollar business. The focus of the correction department of our justice system has switched from retribution in the name of the victims and rehabilitation of offenders to personal job security and profit. Rehabilitation has been traded for full bed assurance, minimal expenditures, and obtaining labor contracts. With profit being the main focus, private prison managers need to come up with ways to cut prison costs. One way is for guards to be paid a minimal salary, which results in a high turnover rate. As with any company that experiences a high turnover rate, private prisons often find themselves in the unwanted position of having employees that are not properly trained and have minimal experience and problem-solving skills. Prisons that advertise themselves as being more efficient than the government-run public prisons now are understaffed with untrained, incompetent security to transport inmates, keep order, and protect the safety of both staff and inmates. The same private prison industry that had promised to save taxpayers money has instead, in many cases, taken their actual livelihood. In Texas, a factory where circuit boards are assembled for companies like IBM and Compaq fired its 150 workers and contracted the services of prisoner workers at the private Lockhart, Texas prison. Like slave owners buying their slaves at an auction, government contractors are buying their labor from private prisons. At FCC Victorville, a federal prison located at an old U.S. air base, prisoners clean and reassemble military vehicles returned from combat and coated in toxic spent ammunition, depleted uranium dust, and chemicals. Prisoners there work covered in dust without safety equipment, protective gear, or air filtration masks. The toxic dust caused severe damage to nervous and reproductive systems, lung damage, bone disease, circulatory and respiratory problems. This is one of 8 federal prisons recycling facilities, employing 1,200 prisoners. Because of low slave-like wages, American prison industries are in the rare position to compete for the contracts that businesses have previously taken to third world countries. Inmates in private prisons earn an average of 17 cents per hour, undercutting the $1.25 per hour they make in federal and state prisons, or the $7.25 federal minimum wage of the working taxpayers private prisons are supposed to be helping. In addition to underpaying their own staff and undermining the communities they promise to better, the story of private prisons gets darker. Mid-Atlantic Youth Services Corporation, a private prison company which runs juvenile facilities, was found guilty of paying two judges $2.6 million to send 2,000 children to their prisons for such minor crimes as trespassing in vacant buildings and stealing DVDs from Walmart. Perverting the justice system into a slave labor marketplace. The contradiction inherent in the idea and practice of privatized prisons has caused a blemish on the concept of American freedom. If the downturns in local economies are not incentive enough to abolish private prisons, then the economic damage combined with heinous human rights violations and corruption ought to be.